Professor Krauss,
Yeah.
you say religion is the only way to make a good person do a bad thing. But don't you think you could turn that around and say, well, religion helps a lot of bad people to just be better and do good things? I mean, speaking for myself,
Yeah.
I'm not a great person, but I'm a lot better because of the influence of Christianity has on me.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you can't deny that religion serves many good purposes in society. There's no doubt it brings people consolation at hard times. It brings people together in groups often and gives support groups. So, you know, it is indeed stereotypical to try and label it. My point is that we pretend that religion only is the basis of morality and leads to good things, and sometimes it does. But a lot of the times, and again, if you read the Old Testament, it's one of the most immoral books ever written.
Okay, I'm going to go to another question.
Very quickly, with respect, I think religion's the only way you can have an objective set of moral values.
Why?
And if you look, well, what else would you suggest?
Reason.
As an objective set.
Reason.
Okay.
It's a beautiful picture from the Hubble Space Telescope of a distant galaxy, far, far away and long, long ago. And there's a whole galaxy, it's about 1 billion light years away. We're looking at it as it looked 1 billion years ago. So many of those stars no longer exist. And here's an object that's just as bright as the whole center of the galaxy. You'd think it's a star that's near in our galaxy that just got caught in the picture frame. It's not. It's a star on the edge of that galaxy that has exploded. And exploding stars shine with a brightness of 10 billion stars. They're the brightest fireworks in the universe, supernovae. And they're remarkable, and I keep having asides. Maybe I'll get to my point eventually. But this is something that I wrote a whole book about, and someone asked me yesterday why I wrote that book. Because it is the most poetic thing I know about the universe. Richard wrote a great book called, what's it called? Our Ancestors, what's it called? Ancestor's Tale, yes. I wanted to make sure I got that right. And I wrote a book that was a different ancestor's tale. It was called Adam. But the amazing thing is that every atom in your body came from a star that exploded. And the atoms in your left hand probably came from a different star than your right hand. It really is the most poetic thing I know about physics. You are all stardust. You couldn't be here if stars hadn't exploded, because the elements, the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, iron, all the things that matter for evolution weren't created at the beginning of time. They're created in the nuclear furnaces of stars, and the only way they can get into your body is if the stars were kind enough to explode. So forget Jesus. The stars died so that you could be here today. Okay? And anyway, this is, you can't read this, but I can, which is what matters. Stars burn, and the rate at which they burn depends upon how big they are. Our sun will last about 10 billion years. It's 4.5 billion years old now. It's halfway through its life. 10 billion, so it has another 5 billion years left. Which, by the way, reminds me of actually the only real cosmology joke I know, so I'll tell it to you. So someone like me is talking to a group of people like you on a Sunday, and he says, you know, the sun is going to burn only for 5 billion more years. And someone in the audience goes, did you say 5 million years? And the speaker says, no, 5 billion years. And the guy goes, whew, okay. Anyway.
Lawrence, is there a possible future for intelligence, especially in a universe that we now know is not only expanding, but under accelerating expansion?
Well, if that acceleration continues, as I like to say, we live in the worst of all possible universes to live in for the future of life. So much for intelligent design. But you can show that among all universes that are continuing to expand forever, a universe which is accelerating, life will end in such a universe before it will end in any other universe. And that's even if you can avoid all of the tragedies that are going to befall this planet, for example. The sun is going to get brighter, and in 2 billion years, the Earth will then be in a zone where Venus is now, and the surface of the Earth will be about 1,000 degrees. In 5 billion years, the sun will expand and eat up the Earth, and lots of things, proton decay, all sorts of things are going to befall us. But let's say we're smart enough to get around all that stuff. It turns out that there are fundamental constraints on life, and therefore intelligence, in the very long term. We do know, for example, that for a long time, life can exist as we know it with intelligence that's powered by solar power, which is what our planet is, for at least, 1 trillion to 10 trillion years. Because there will be stars more or less like our sun that will be around for that long. There'll be life and there could be intelligence but it won't be very happy, okay? Because, especially if it's intelligent. Because if the universe is accelerating, then the rest of the universe is slowly disappearing before our very eyes. Distant stars are moving away from us faster than the speed of light. And if we wait long enough, everything outside of our local cluster of galaxies will have disappeared.
But you go far enough into the future, and you wind up with nothing.
That's
You
what it
wind
certainly
up
looks like.
with a random photon every galaxy's space
Oh, I know, but
or
if you're
more.
willing, but if you're willing to be a science fiction aficionado or very inventive physicist, you might say, "What do you mean? Big deal. Your sense of time could change, right?" So right now, a few minutes may seem like a lot, but in such a universe, you could have a living system where if it had a thought every 10 trillion years, that would seem normal. We have a pace of life that's based on really the energy available to us now. You could imagine living conscious systems which have a very different pace and therefore can extend out at least a lot farther than you'd imagine otherwise. All worlds right now seem like they will suggest that life will end. But, you see, I don't want people to get too depressed, because the nice thing about life is also the following. It's a fluctuation. It locally stores energy. In a universe that's getting more and more random, life likes to build up complexity. And so even if our life dies out, one could imagine at some time arbitrarily far in the future, a fluctuation occurs which allows intelligent life to exist again for a little while in a cosmic future, and then again and again. So you might have islands in time of intelligence. So even in a hopeless, pointless, miserable universe, there's something to look forward to.
My question is, do Christians have a special responsibility to respond to human-induced climate change?
John Dixon, let's start with you.
Yes. But most Christians accept the science. This is, I hope, one of the themes of tonight's Q&A. It's Christians get all the science Lawrence is talking about, plus all the other wonderful stuff. So it's not just that wonderful stuff or some of them. So yes, we have a deep responsibility. I mean, there are some very deep ideas driving a Christian response to climate change. It's the science, we're schooled by the scientists, and then the Christian sits there thinking, this creation is actually a creation, an intended, beautiful work of art, and humanity is here to care for it. And more than that we're here to care for our neighbours, especially the neighbours that are going to feel the effects of climate change more than most, poorer communities. So there is, I would just say, a deeper or added dimension to the Christian care of the earth. Whether that's showing itself in church action is another question, but theoretically, Christianity should drive a very deep commitment.
But not a special one. I really object to this notion that somehow, look, I applaud that you get faith and meaning in your life from your faith. That's fine. I get faith, I get meaning in my life from my lack of faith, okay? I mean, the fact that I see the meaning in my life is the meaning I make. And the meaning for all of us, we're so lucky to be here on this planet and have brains and being able to understand the universe back to the earliest moments of the Big Bang and be able to impact on our future. And we should use those brains, and whether or not, and we shouldn't rely on someone else guiding us.
What I'm saying is, I get all of that. I get all of that.
But hold on.
Plus Jesus.
But the point is, that's fine. But the point is, that doesn't give you any special. We are all humans. So you may get your meaning from your life from Christianity, but to argue that
and
you
science.
have, but
I get
to argue
science
that you have somehow an
Jesus.
addition that gives you
Okay.
more meaning in your life and more reason to take care of the earth is crazy. We all have the responsibility to take care of the earth, whether we're Christians or not. The beautiful features of the other theories is that quantum fluctuations, and there are an infinite number of them, could in principle produce infinite contributions, which would mean you couldn't calculate with those theories. But it turns out that there's a symmetry associated with those theories that causes those contributions to be manageable. You can ignore the infinities and produce predictions which actually work. It turns out in general relativity, because of its mathematical formulation, you can't ignore those infinities. At some level, the quantum mechanical contributions can't be tamed, and they produce nonsense.
It really is just because of the nature, the mathematical nature of general relativity. And that's one of the features. The other is the conceptual problem of if space and time are the variables of general relativity as they are, then to have a quantum theory space and time is conceptually very complicated. But right now that's not the problem. The problem is mathematical, that you have to make sure that infinite fluctuations in the gravitational field at very small scales don't screw up the theory, and right now they screw it up. That's why we're reasonably certain that general relativity is not the full story when it comes to gravity, that the theory will have to be modified, just like all other theories have been modified, as you go to ever smaller scales. There are two possibilities, that the theory will be modified by a quantum theory that is itself scale dependent, or that the theory will be modified by something like string theory, which produces an ultimate theory which describes the universe all the way down to the scale size 0. And you know, we're not talking about very much landscape here. We're talking about the scale where quantum mechanics of gravity becomes important is something like 10 to the minus 30 centimeters or so. And we're talking about, can you have a theory that describes the universe from 10 to the minus 30 centimeters down to 0? And as my friend, I think Frank Wilczek has said about string theory, it's not a theory of everything, it's a theory of almost nothing.
God that we've created is not the kind of, I mean, you know, if you were a God, omnipotent, would you be so petty and jealous? Would you say, hey, let me get you to almost kill your son to see if you believe in me? Okay? Or, you know what, I want you to prostrate before me 5 times a day to show you love me. I mean, if you had an ant farm, would you kill the ants if they didn't look up at you every day and tell you how wonderful you were? Okay? I mean, it's just kind of, for an omnipotent being, he's pretty petty. Or she. And even Christianity, which is supposed to be this loving religion, says, believe in me or go to hell for all eternity. Gee, thanks. Or, based on here's what I want to do. I'm going to kill my own son and torture him to absolve humanity from original sin associated with a non-existent forebear, Adam. I mean, it's nonsense.
Whether we're alone in the universe, in some sense, defines the universe for us. And as Carl Sagan said, if we're alone, it's an awful waste of space. But at some point, the question comes down to an interesting question of how rare is intelligence? I mean, it could be, and I happen to believe that since all the conditions for life exist elsewhere in the galaxy, water, organic materials, light, all of that, that life is ubiquitous. But the key question is intelligence an evolutionary imperative? Do all routes of evolution lead to intelligence? And on Earth they did. Well, at least one route did. And where it goes from here, we won't know. But that happened by a series of evolutionary accidents.
Isn't that a contradiction? Either evolution, through its imperative, causes intelligent life, or it's an accident. It can't be both. If it's an imperative,
well, I mean,
that sounds like theistic evolution.
Well, by imperative, I mean that all roads lead there, regardless of how random they are.
Wow, that's a powerful comment.
I don't know. I mean, I think all streams will go downhill, but I don't think they're being guided, other than by the force of gravity. And so are there physical laws that inevitably cause intelligence to be selected naturally in a way that allows, inevitably, if you have lots of different life forms, the intelligent life form will eventually come and dominate the planet, ruin the atmosphere, build huge cities, etc.
I know a whole bunch of theologians who could not have said that better.
Well, that doesn't say much. But I'm willing to believe that even if it's really rare, there's still a lot of intelligent life in the galaxy.
Well, what that brings up is Fermi's paradox. If you have all this time, billions of years in universal history, and you have billions of stars in our galaxy and hundreds of billions of galaxies, and now we know planets around maybe many stars.
Most stars, we think,
have planets. Where are the aliens?
Okay. Well, we live in a random corner in the far edge of the Milky Way galaxy. Fermi's paradox is that, well, look, if life evolved, it would basically colonize the galaxy, and you could calculate it would send out robots or parts of its civilization to 4 other planets that would